In the early hours of November 5, 1605, England came within hours of catastrophe. Beneath the very heart of political power, the House of Lords, lay enough gunpowder to level the building, kill the king, and change the course of British history forever. This was no accident. It was a carefully planned act of rebellion, driven by religious persecution, political desperation, and one of the boldest conspiracies ever attempted. This is the story of the Gunpowder Plot. To understand why it happened, we need to step back into England in the early 1600s. Decades earlier, King Henry VIII had broken from the Catholic Church, establishing the Church of England. Over time, Protestantism became the official religion, and Catholics were increasingly treated as enemies of the state. Laws fined them for refusing to attend Protestant services, barred them from public office, and placed heavy restrictions on their worship. When James VI of Scotland became James I of England in 1603, many Catholics felt a spark of hope. James was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, a Catholic martyr in their eyes. They believed he might soften England's harsh anti-Catholic laws, but those hopes quickly collapsed. James maintained, and in some cases even strengthened, the penalties against Catholics. For a growing number of them, peaceful change now seemed impossible. At the center of the conspiracy was Robert Catesby, a charismatic and deeply religious Catholic gentleman. Catesby was convinced that England's government would never tolerate Catholicism unless it was forced to change. He was not alone. Catesby gathered a small, dedicated group of conspirators who shared his belief that violent action was not only necessary, but justified. Among them were Thomas Percy, a well-connected nobleman, Robert and Thomas Wintour, and the Wright brothers, John and Christopher. They were all bound by shared faith and a desperate desire for change. But Catesby needed someone with a very specific skill set, an expert in explosives, a man of action. That man was Guy Fawkes. Fawkes had fought as a professional soldier in Europe for Catholic causes and had extensive experience with gunpowder. He wasn't just a local plotter, he was shaped by the international Catholic conflicts and wars of the era. He joined the conspiracy in 1604 and became its most critical operative. While Catesby provided the vision and leadership, Fawkes was the one who would provide the fire. The conspirators' plan was both simple and utterly devastating. They would blow up the House of Lords. During the state opening of Parliament on November 5, 1605, the explosion would kill England's entire leadership in a single, fiery moment. In the chaos that followed, the conspirators planned to kidnap one of the king's children, Princess Elizabeth, and install her as a Catholic monarch, ruling under their influence. It was a plan to decapitate the state and seize control. Over several months, the group secretly rented storage space directly beneath the House of Lords. Into this underground cellar, they painstakingly smuggled 36 barrels of gunpowder, a massive amount, certainly enough to reduce the entire building to rubble and shatter the windows of nearby Westminster Abbey. The stage was set. Guy Fawkes was chosen for the most dangerous role, to light the fuse and escape in the seconds before the blast. But, despite the meticulous planning and secrecy, doubt began to creep in. Some of the conspirators grew anxious, worrying that innocent people, including fellow Catholics who were members of Parliament, would be killed in the explosion. This moral dilemma would prove to be their undoing. In late October 1605, just days before the planned attack, an anonymous letter reached William Parker, Lord Monteagle, a Catholic nobleman. The letter was cryptic, warning him to devise some excuse to shift your attendance at this Parliament, and that the building would receive a terrible blow. Monteagle, faced with a terrible choice, immediately turned the letter over to the authorities. At first, the king's officials hesitated. Was it a real threat or just a twisted prank? But as the date approached, they decided they couldn't take the risk. On the night of November 4th, royal guards conducted a thorough search of the parliamentary cellars. There, in the darkness, they found a man standing guard. It was Guy Fawkes, armed, alert, and standing next to a huge pile of firewood hiding the barrels of gunpowder. Fawkes was arrested on the spot and brought before King James himself. At first he was defiant, refusing to talk, giving a false name, and denying everything. But under the authority of the king, he was taken to the Tower of London and subjected to systematic torture. Eventually, Fawkes broke. He revealed the details of the plot and, crucially, the names of his fellow conspirators. Meanwhile, the others had heard the news and fled London, desperately attempting to rally supporters in the countryside. But their escape failed. Support never materialized. A final, dramatic shootout occurred at Holbeck House, where several conspirators, including Catesby, were killed. The rest were captured and brought back to London in chains to face their fate. In January 1606, the surviving conspirators were put on trial for high treason. The verdict was never in doubt. They were sentenced to the most severe punishment England could offer, to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. Guy Fawkes was among them, though he reportedly avoided the worst of the brutal sentence by breaking his neck during the hanging. The message from the Crown was brutally clear. Treason would be met with absolute and merciless retribution. In the aftermath, England doubled down on its anti-Catholic laws, making life even harder for the very people the plotters had hoped to save. But something else happened too. Public celebrations spontaneously erupted to mark the king's survival. Bonfires were lit to symbolize the destruction of the traitors. Bells rang out across the country. Over time, these events evolved into the annual tradition of Bonfire Night, celebrated every November 5th. And Guy Fawkes, once a failed conspirator, became a lasting and complex symbol. He is remembered in the famous rhyme, in folklore, and in the effigies burned on bonfires. More recently, his stylized mask has been adopted by modern protest movements around the world, representing anti-establishment ideals. The famous rhyme begins, "Remember, remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot." The Gunpowder Plot was a failure, but it was nearly a world-changing one. It stands as a powerful reminder of how fear, faith, and a thirst for power can drive people to extremes, and just how close history often comes to taking a very different path. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most dramatic conspiracies, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. We explore the moments where history almost went another way, and believe me, there are plenty more still to come. Thanks for watching.